What's up, y'all? So, hopefully, this setting will work for me for a second. I am in the process of moving my office. So, I didn't have anywhere to go. So, I'm chilling in my room. What's up, sis? Peace, peace, peace. All right, y'all. So, I want to talk a little bit about this Black capitalism article that came out that kind of it really disturbed me a little bit. And not that I disagreed with it, but I think that there are some things that are misconstrued and not really accurate. And I just kind of wanted to touch on it because it was such a well written piece that I think uh, it can easily be taken to heart, and I didn't feel like it was, what I thought it should be. So anyway, while you come on in, I'm gonna talk about it, but I just want to welcome you on in. Please hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and make sure that you share. I appreciate everybody for joining us. I want to make sure that you text Black Agenda to 484848. If you did not know, we are bringing the Black Agenda to Denver. That's going to be June 29th. So you can check out that information as well. And come on in, come on in, come on in. So also a couple of quick things. You can find out more information about the Black Business Initiative over at BBIProfessional.com. I want to remember to throw in a little bit of information about that as the channel continues to grow and just as we're getting out and meeting more people. If you are looking to start your Black business, grow your Black business, or scale your Black business, you can head over there. And our site is still a little bit under construction. Most of it is up. We have one section that I'm still working on to get where I want it to be, but that is coming really soon. So make sure that you stay in touch with us. You can sign up to be a part of our newsletter. And make sure that you're in touch. And then also don't forget that I do business coaching on mindset and productivity. And if you want to coach with me, you can look into doing my group coaching program or my one-on-one coaching program. And then also don't forget that you can connect with me on Patreon. So I'm going to throw out all of my plugs as we get started. So listen, this article, first of all, I had a few people who sent me this article. Like, I got sent this article maybe like 5 times by people in my network who were just like, have you seen this? Right. And some people, they just left it there. Some people were like, this is bullshit. And some people were like, I think, he has a point. Right. So I went in and I started looking at, what was being said in this article. And I think it's really interesting to take note of. And so I want to just start with the title. Okay, so he calls capitalism consumerism. I'm actually look it up real quick and pull it up on my phone so that I actually have the article sitting in front of me. But it was just the fact that he did that up front kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because we need to understand what capitalism is and we need to understand what consumerism is, and they're not one and the same. All right, give me 1 second, y'all. I'm sorry. I should have had it up already. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. Black Capitalism Won't Save Us. So his title was Black Capitalism Won't Save Us. And then the subtitle says, celebrities like Killer Mike and Jay-Z equate Black ownership with liberation, but you can't end racial inequality with consumerism. So first, can we just start by breaking down a couple of those words that he used, right? So he starts off by saying Black capitalism won't save us. Now, he's really talking about a program, but a lot of Black people don't know that he's talking about a program. So when you say Black capitalism, what it sounds like you're saying is entrepreneurship won't save us, right? That being in the Black or building a Black economy, building a strong economic base won't save us. Then he goes on to say, again, just in the subtitle, like we haven't even gotten to anything in the article, but just in the subtitle, he goes on to say, you can't end racial inequality with consumerism. I 100% agree with that. But Black capitalism or Black ownership is not the same thing as Black consumerism. And so we need to really understand that. Like when he's saying consumerism, he's saying it more in a derogatory sense. Like he's more saying it as in people who just continuously buy things, right? So we as a people, and this is a fact, we are largely consumers more so than producers. And so that part is true. So he's saying that you can't end racial inequality with consumerism. And that I agree with, but I don't think that it fits the bill to say that Black capitalism won't save us. Or to say that Black ownership, that you can't equate Black ownership with liberation, which is also partially true. It's a lot true, but I think that it takes a lot of unpacking, right? So great, because then he unpacks, because he goes on for a very lengthy article about this. Now, I will say, as a part of what I've done, is I have looked at quite a few of his links. He links back to a lot of other articles. There are some articles that were also like very lengthy that he linked back to that I have not gone back to finish reading, but that just because I study this in the Black community, I have a general sense of what he's talking about, but I didn't go back and read every link article. But I like to do that because when I'm going to break down something, like I want to come and be prepared to break down some points and really make sure that I've done a thorough job. One of my issues that I have with a lot of, I'm going to say lightly, Black media, and I say that very lightly, but with Black media is that people get on and they start talking these facts without actually having done the research. And I think that in and of itself is a problem. So before you come on and start talking about who said what and who did this and did you hear that, like go back and do a little bit of research and actually, listen to a full video, read a full article. We're in a soundbite type of society, and people go in and they take these little sound bites, and then you have no context, and context is very key. And this is part of the reason why we struggle in the way that we do to really actualize and realize, when it comes to gaining information, because if you don't have the right context of what someone said and you only heard a 10-second clip out of a 30-second spill, like you can't really fully understand the gist of what they were saying, right? And so then that's how a lot of stuff gets started. And all of that is like clickbait stuff. That's stuff that people just want for the views and all of that. But, at the end of the day, we have to do better, right? Because we're not in the same situation as everybody else. So if all of white media wants to walk around and do sound bites and play on all of that BS, why do we hold ourselves to white mediocrity? Why do we make Black excellence equate to white mediocrity? That's something that frustrates me to no end, is that whatever it is that white society is doing, 9 times out of 10, that shit is mediocre, and we should not hold ourselves to that same standard. So because they're doing it does not mean we should be doing it. So anyway, that was a long roundabout way to let you know that I did not read every link that he wrote in here. That he put in here, but I did read quite a few of them just so I could see what he was pulling on as he was putting this piece together, right? Because it matters what information he's drawing on to gain this type of very, lengthy conclusion. So let me start by saying I'm a little bit disappointed that at the end of all of this, and when I tell you this is a lengthy interview, lengthy article, it's a pretty lengthy article. A lot of articles, are definitely not all of them. You have long ones, but a lot of articles are like in the 300 to like 700 word range. This is long. This is longer than that. So anyway, he wrote a long article, and I just wanted to know, where was he starting to pull this information from, and what mindset was he coming from as he was writing this? What I will say is, just off the rip, is that by the time you get all the way down to the bottom of it, he really doesn't offer any solutions. Like at the very end, his solution is basically that we need to change our narrative. He says we must tell the truth. Actually, I'm gonna read you the end. It says, but if we are ever to create economic justice, we must change the way art conceptualizes that justice. We must change the stories we tell. We must tell the truth. So basically, he's saying that we're full of shit, and that his only answer is we got to start by changing the narrative, right? So I find that to be really disappointing. I'm gonna throw this out here as well, because I think sometime, again, like if you follow me, just start to realize right now, I don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. So even when I disagree with something that somebody has said, it doesn't mean that I disagree with all of what they have said. And so one of the issues that I have currently with, and I don't think I hear this as much. I'm just starting to listen to Yvette Carnell a little bit more as the ADOS is, really beginning to take off. I am wanting to follow what it is that they're talking about. I'm rooting for, this movement to to turn into some, legislative policy, right? So I'm rooting for that. So, first of all, just understand that piece. And then as a part of that, one of the things that I disagree with is the notion that we should be 100% dependent upon, or we believe that 100% of our freedom or our liberation is 100% is dependent upon those who have oppressed us, right? So if you're telling me that the only answer to my liberation is through those who have oppressed me, I have a problem with that. And by and large, when we shoot down everything else except for policy that comes from the government, then what you're telling me is that the same government who has oppressed us and who created these policies to oppress us is also by the only way that we can ever get free. I cannot buy that. I cannot live by that. So Killer Train in the commentary says that's not what Cornell Nortone says. No, it really actually it is. Like when you talk about Black economics, they're saying that basically they're saying building Black businesses isn't going to do anything. They're saying that education not going to do anything. They're saying that we cannot get out of this racial wealth gap, and therefore we cannot really be any sort of a player in our own destiny in America unless the government changes policy. I'm going to say that that's not a message that I back. Do I back policy changes? Absolutely, 110%. Do I say that is the only way to our liberation? No. Do I think that it is a necessary component of our liberation? Yes. Okay, so now they are saying that without protections and capital, it is hard to sustain those businesses. And I agree. But again, if the only way to my liberation is through my oppressors, that's a shitty hand, right? Because in 500 years, our oppressors have not felt the need to make real policy changes that actually do anything for us. Peace. Thank you, James. I appreciate that. I'm doing well. So to answer that, or to respond to that, I agree that it's hard to sustain those businesses without capital. I am a Black business owner. I help other Black owners. Like that's some real shit. That's definitely real. But what I'm saying is that you can't make the one and only, this is what I've said before. There is no silver bullet to our situation. Our situation is multi-layered and it's undergirded by policy for sure. So policy has to change, but I can't, not what you can do. I'm gonna tell you what I can do. I cannot only look at the government as being the one and only chance that I have to make widespread change inside of our communities, right? So I just don't look at it like that. Now, I have no problem if you continue to follow that narrative. That's cool. That's you. And again, I'm not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So I'm not against ADOS. I'm not against what they're saying. I'm actually very much on board with like 90% of what they say. But that's one component that I can't get with. I will not make the white government be the only way that I'm going to break free or build any type of life or build legacy or work on behalf of our communities to build any type of legacy. I won't. That's not my mindset. So that's that. So hold on, I'm gonna have to come back to you because 90% of my business from Black baby boomers, the younger groups of us. Yes. Okay. So it is a conundrum. We can agree on that one. All right. So let me keep going real quick. So he has this title, Black Capitalism, and ultimately my point and how I got to ADOS was just the idea that I don't view that our only answer is the government. I believe that is a big part, but I don't view it as the only part, right? And so that's one piece. So Crystal is 100% on point. And that's what the Black Agenda is about, y'all. So make sure you head over to the BlackAgenda on tour.com. All right, so let me start breaking down some of this. So the first thing that he gets into, I'm going to skip over some of his rhetoric and just kind of putting some, he's got some stuff in there. It's a good article. I would go back and read it. So basically, he says entrepreneurship and consumerism can only do so much because the reason Black neighborhoods are troubled, mass eviction, mass incarceration, double-digit unemployment, redlining, can hardly be blamed on the dearth of Black ownership. And changing them will require political and artistic narratives that extend far beyond the scope of Black commerce. So let's talk about this. First of all, I agree. Eviction, incarceration, unemployment, redlining, all of those things are policy issues, right? I agree with that largely. And some of them, a lot of them, I feel like economics and policy really go hand in hand because ultimately that is what creates a capitalistic society. So when we say that America is a capitalistic society, and for a lot of times, if you're not in economics, you're not in finance, you're not in business, that may be a term that just kind of flies over your head, like the fact that we live in this capitalistic society. What does that really mean? What that really means is that our policy and our economics, basically our money and our policy, really are tied together. And the majority of our policy supports entrepreneurship because capitalism is a system by which the majority of your services are provided by private ownership, meaning I start a business, I own it privately, I provide a service, I provide a product, and the government's policies support you, the consumer, getting your products or your services through me, a private owned business that provides those products or services, right? So our government is supportive of entrepreneurship. That is why I state that Black people need to have a business because our tax codes are supportive of Black businesses. So it's important for us to understand that if you are starting a business, you can go back to my Boss Up with BBI podcast from last week on Wednesday. I dropped that and I talk about how to start a business, but understanding that businesses are tied to our tax policy. Businesses are tied to all of our policy because we are in a capitalistic society. That is what that means. So when we talk about things like eviction, why is eviction a problem? Because our government is not required to provide housing. So they created welfare programs that can help people who need help, who need economic help with housing, but ultimately it's through private landlords. So Section 8 means that me, as a landlord, the government might help you pay your rent, but they're going to pay it to me as a private landlord, and I have to be certified with them. We have to have our connection, but you might pay a little bit or nothing at all. And the government is going to cut me a check in order to house you, right? So when we look at things like eviction being a policy issue, it's a policy issue because the policy supports me as an entrepreneur or as a private landlord. And I have the right to have people who pay their rent live in my house. I own it. It's mine. And if you don't pay your rent, you don't take care of it, you don't follow my policies, I have the right to then get rid of you, right? So that also means that I have a right to a certain extent, right? To be biased. I can be prejudiced. I can decide that I want to only rent to certain type of people. As a Black landlord, I happen to be like that. I like renting to Black people. Now, I'm not going to say that I've only rented to Black people. Certainly have had other people live with me or other people rent for me that are not Black. But I certainly will try my damnedest to make sure that whoever's living in my property is Black first. So that's something that we should put into context, is Black first, right? Not Black always, but Black first. But so a capitalist society, the government helps who it wants, hence the bailouts. Yes. So, but again, just understanding. So part of the issue with America is that America is not a truly capitalistic society because America is undergirded by racism. So we also have to understand that, but understand that policy is there to support the entrepreneur. That is what builds capitalism. That's basically what it is. It is a political and economic system that supports private ownership. Okay. So when he talks about these things, eviction, incarceration, unemployment, redlining, all of these things are actually policy issues, and they are also economic issues because those things are tied together. So those things are important for us to understand. So he says that it can hardly be blamed on the dearth of Black ownership and that changing them will require political and artistic narratives that extend far beyond the scope of Black commerce. So again, I'm in agreement there with him on that. So then he goes on, he talks a little bit more, and then I'm gonna drop down to another area where he's talking about a narrative of emancipatory commercialism. So basically what he's saying is that we have a narrative that says that if you buy things, if you basically if you buy stuff, that you'll be liberated, right? And whether that's buying things like buying businesses or buying stocks or buying land or whatever, but ultimately if you buy things, that you'll be liberated. And I don't think that narrative is really what the reality is, but I think that we understand that there's power in where our dollar goes. If there wasn't, then people would not push so hard for they would not push so hard to get our dollar, right? There's power where money is flowing. And ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, like we are a we are a consumerist socioeconomic group at this point. And that's something that can change, but we do consume a lot of things, right? So he goes on to talk about these things, and he kind of goes in on trigger warning. So trigger warning is Killer Mike's documentary. I'm going to use that word lightly, but Killer Mike's documentary is Trigger Warning. And I have not watched all the episodes of Trigger Warning. I think I have watched 3. I feel like I've watched 3, maybe 4 of those episodes. Don't quote me, but somewhere around there. I know I've watched more than 2, but I feel like it was either 3 or 4 of his episodes on Netflix, right? So anyway, he goes in and talk about some of these things, and basically he makes it seem as if like Black entrepreneurship. He says is that these documentaries make it seem as if Black entrepreneurs are free from exploitation and racism and all of that. And I'm like, hardly. I don't know any Black entrepreneur that feels like entrepreneurship has freed them from exploitation, racism, things like that. First of all, as an organization that specifically is for Black entrepreneurs, I get invited into white spaces a lot, very frequently, right? I get invited into those spaces for people who want to have a diverse conversation. They want to show that they are open to diversity. They want to have access to my network. They want to do that for virtually nothing. They want to be able to, invite in the Black community, so that they can show that they're inclusive and that they're equitable and all of those things, right? So I get exploited just in and of that, just by that of itself. Not to mention that I struggle with getting funding for my organization. I struggle with goodness, when I get finished with this like house situation, I'm gonna tell y'all the whole story of like struggling to get this house refinanced and get equity outside of property that I already own, right? So it's difficult to get equity out of property that you own. So that, liquid cash, right? That's difficult to get my hands on, despite a number of factors that should make me okay to get cash out, or should make it fairly easy. And I highly doubt that my white counterparts would go through the same struggles that I'm going through to get access to assets that they already own. So I'm not through that struggle yet. When I come through that struggle, I will tell you all about it so that we can all hooray and be joyous together. So anyway, he says that that these narratives make it seem like Black entrepreneurs are free from exploitation. And I just want to ask y'all, do y'all feel like Black entrepreneurs are free from racism and exploitation? Is there something that is in these films or clips? Like, do you feel like Jay-Z is free from racism? Do you feel like Nipsey was free from racism? Like, I just want to understand if there's something that I'm missing. Do we feel like rich Black people are free from racism? Like Robert Smith himself says, he still gets pulled over going to the airport, and he's a billionaire. So Wigglesworth, I don't know if you're trying to be funny because you say yes, you do. If you do, you got it all wrong, right? So you might be being funny, or maybe you're very serious. I don't know, but I can assure you that the statistics definitely don't don't pan out that way. Yeah, Bill Cosby versus Harvey Weinstein is a great example. If Bill Cosby did everything that they said that he did, he should be in jail, but shouldn't Harvey Weinstein as well, right? And his whole cases were out before then. So, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting, you know, that he would get this take that something in these documentaries would be preaching a narrative that Black entrepreneurship is free from exploitation, free from racism, free from these things. Wigworth says, I just don't think it is as prevalent as we say. What isn't as prevalent as we say? Racism isn't as prevalent as we say? Because my question is, do you think Black entrepreneurs are free from exploitation and racism? And then you say, yes, I do. Okay, I'll wait for you to fill in some more because I don't understand what you're saying. But hardly. Like, and those gaps are very much documented. There are studies after study after study that talk about the credit gap, that talk about the wealth gap, that talk about being the access to capital gap. Like, all of these things exist. Our businesses, we have about 2.5 million businesses, and 95% of those businesses are single member LLCs and sole proprietorships. And what that means is that they are self-employed. They don't actually have a business that runs outside of them. So if Bill Gates decides he's going on vacation, is his business still going to run? Absolutely. And there are a number of folks who you can name who, if they were to take a vacation, right? And we don't have to name like the top people, but let's name people who we know, right? But you can think about somebody, maybe your boss, the person who you go to work for, right? Can they take off of work and will their business still be up and running? If the answer is yes, they have a business, they're not self-employed. Now, they might also work for themselves, but if their business can also sustain itself without their presence being there, even for a short amount of time, then they are beginning to build, or they have built a business. It means that they have built a system that works outside of them. They built something that could be passed down and on to someone else, right? And so when we talk about that, like, Black business owners are not in that position. And so, you know, the majority of them are single member LLC, sole proprietorships, meaning that it is them. They wear every hat in their business, and they might hire out a person here or there as a contractor. But that means that they have no real true employees. They have no one who they are W-2ing. They might have someone who will invoice them and they might pay that person. That's a contractor. They might have somebody who is like contracted on their end, where they have a contract with that person and they pay them a 1099, but that person also still does not work for them officially. That person works for themselves. That person is in business for themselves, and they have an agreement as to what that person is going to do or exchange for services or products or whatever, right? So a lot of times we don't even have our own businesses. Or we don't have true businesses. We are sole proprietorships. Or, you know, a single member LLC and a sole proprietorship is basically the same thing. It's a different legal entity, but it is a one man, one woman shop, right? That's what it is. So, anyway, so then he goes on to saying that he kind of gets into this example, using Killer Mike's, one of Killer Mike's episodes. And I just found his example to be, all kinds of crazy. So he says, so he's basically talking about circularization of the Black dollar, right? So first of all, he does have an article in here which talks about the 6-hour figure can't be verified. So I don't know about that. This is what he put in here. This is his research. But so let me break this down a little bit. So here's a part of the article. He's talking about Killer Mike, right? So he's actually quoting Killer Mike, where he says, I think that the Black community can do a better job of keeping the dollar in our ecosystem longer. Mike said on his reality show. White and Asian people, Mike notes, recirculate money in their communities for weeks, while Black communities only retain theirs for hours. After citing this fuzzy math, right? So this is what this guy is saying, calling it fuzzy math. He then praised Jim Crow, of all things, saying that during segregation, from top to bottom, the ecosystem from a dollar perspective stayed Black. Hence, we had a true Black working class, a true Black middle class, and we could send kids off to college. Here, Mike's logic points towards a type of economic segregation that would supposedly generate wealth through the ownership of Black businesses. Okay, so this whole section is crazy to me. Like, I just think this is crazy. This makes no sense to me. So, first of all, he's refuting the idea that we can count how often a dollar circulates. So some of you may be familiar with that, where they talk about the recirculation of dollars inside of our communities, right? So the Jewish community holds on to their dollar for so long, the Asian community holds on to their dollar for so long, but the Black community, as the number goes, holds on to their dollar for hours. So reportedly within 6 hours, your dollar has left your community and it has gone to someone else outside of your community into another community. Now, he has an article in here. This article basically shows all the ways that they tried to track down where this $6, 6 hour dollar circulation statistic or whatever came from. Okay, cool. So I have not verified that, but I did read the article. And basically, the article is saying that there's no real place where it tracks down to. We know it tracks down to like Maggie Anderson. We know there's a lot of places who use the statistic, but they can't find where that statistic actually came from. They can't find a study. They talk about some of the larger studies who don't actually track that information. Okay, so cool. So let's throw that out the window for a second. Let's throw out the idea that you can track this circulation rate. But let's start talking about practicality, right? So how do dollars circulate? You go to work. First of all, if you go to work for the government or for a white-owned company, which is the majority, or let's say a white-owned, Asian-owned, Jewish-owned, Hispanic-owned, Arab-owned, all of that, right? You go to work. Most likely you do not go to work for somebody Black. So let's start with that. Most likely you don't, right? Because we didn't already said 95% of Black-owned businesses are single member LLC and sole proprietorships. So you don't go to work for somebody Black. So first of all, there's dollars from another community that are coming into our community. Potentially, they are now inside of Black hands. First of all, most likely you don't bank Black, right? So that means that your dollars are now going into a white-owned institution. Now let's talk about banking real quick. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on all of these. I'm just going to break down an overview. So for some of y'all super intellectual, technical people like myself, just follow me. You don't bank Black, not the majority of us. So that means that your dollars are going into a white institution. Now, inside of that white institution, first of all, your dollars don't sit there for that long because most of our paychecks is already spent. That's not even just a Black issue. That's an American issue. We already know that a significant amount of Americans struggle to put together $400, okay? So people don't have their money sitting in their bank account that long, but your paycheck goes into your bank account. Let's also acknowledge that 20% of the Black-owned community is not banked. So let's talk about that 20%. So only 80% of your money goes into 80% of our collective money goes inside the bank, mostly a white-owned bank. The other 20% is going to places like check cashing and other stuff like that. They're already charging you fees. All those fees are also going to white institutions. Can we agree on that? Now, on the 80% of us who do use the banking system, most of us don't bank Black. Now, that means that your dollars are going into a banking institution. Those banks actually use your money to make investments. And even if you're not letting it sit there that long, it's still being used as an investment. Like the way that their cash flow system works and the way that they control assets and things like that, it's being used for investments. Those investments are not going to you. Okay, so they're not giving you business loans. They're not giving you mortgage loans. Hell, they're barely giving you car loans, if that, right? They're not really giving you a lot of that. Every now and again, they may give you a credit card. Banking institutions are very conservative. They are low risk type of institutions, and Black folks are considered high risk. So the banking institution is dollars to you, but you are funding them to circulate those dollars back into the white community. So there's one. So white dollars go funnel through you back into the white community. I just want us to recognize that white dollars from your job or the government are funneled through you very briefly into your bank. That's one thing. Then let's say you start paying your bills. So again, let's say you're paying your rent or your mortgage, either one. Your mortgage is most likely not owned by a Black-owned bank, right? Your rent, unless you're renting from someone, most likely you're not. You are also, again, pouring the majority of your income right back out into white dollars. So even if this cannot be verified that our dollars leave our community within 6 hours, I just want to start breaking down how this works. Now, if you are white, if you were Jewish, even if you were Asian, you could very well get dollars in from an employer who is white, Jewish, or Asian, right? You can get those dollars in, and it is very possible that when you pay them back out, you're paying them back out to a white-owned bank, a Jewish-owned bank. There are Asian-owned banks, right? So you could be paying back into your own community. And if you are renting, you could also, it is very likely that you could be renting from someone who looks like you. That is not the case from us, but that's where a significant amount of your money is going to go. Let's break down the next section. Okay, so now let's start talking about utilities, right? So our water bills are not owned by us. Electric bills are not owned by us. Gas bills not owned by us. Trash bill not owned by us. Internet bill not owned by us. Cable bill not owned by us. Cell phone bill not owned by us. So grocery bill not owned by us. Let's see what else. Student loans, not owned by us. Car notes, not owned by us. So now that leaves potentially some of your clothing items, which if you're shopping at Walmart, Target, JCPenney's, Macy's, the list goes on. Unless you're buying from an independent Black clothing provider, you're not buying from us. And just because they put a Black face on it, right? Gabrielle Union does not own New York and Company. She has a line at New York and Company, meaning they put her face to their clothing line. So unless you're buying independent Black clothing, they're not buying from us. You're not getting your formula. You're not getting your diapers. You're not getting your wipes from us. You're not getting your, and now here's some other places you can go. You can get your hair supplies from us. Some of them, right? Maybe. But oftentimes you're doing that through the white communities as well. Places like Walmart or Target, and you're gonna buy who's on the shelf there. I have a couple of things that I get out of there, right? Used to be Shea Moisture, they sold. Used to be Carol's Daughter, they sold, right? So so I just want us to think about the fact that when they say the Black dollar does not circulate inside of our community, I'm going to say that's probably pretty true. Because when you start breaking down the basics of your expenses, the majority of that goes somewhere else. It just does. We don't own enough for us to do that. So there are other places that we can begin to have ownership, but there is a report. It's called the Tapestry Report. Maybe I'll break down that report later. But the Tapestry Report actually breaks down like the major sectors where we go. And again, the majority of our businesses, single member LLC, sole proprietorships, means our businesses are not manufacturing or mass producing anything. So the majority of our businesses are also on the consumer end. So anyway, I feel like this is just crazy because, again, bringing back to this article, he's saying that he's basically stating that the idea of circulating our dollars in our community as being something that would generate wealth is asinine. And then he basically makes it seem like Killer Mike was praising Jim Crow, which he wasn't. What he was acknowledging was the fact that during Jim Crow, we were able to circulate our dollars, right? Because then we did make stuff. We made furniture. We had bus companies. We had broom companies. We had taxi cabs. We have things that we now pay for in the white community, the Jewish community, the Asian community that we had ourselves. We had grocery stores. We had hospitals. So our dollar was able to actually circulate in our own community. And it did actually create wealth. That wealth was burned to the ground because we weren't protected by policy. So again, I'm not negating policy as being an issue. I said, I'll say it again, there isn't a silver bullet. It's not one or the other. It's both, because that's what capitalism is. It's both. And you can't negate economics just to say that we only have to focus on policy. We have to focus on both. If we change the policy, we need to have business ownership that's ready to go. So are we all supposed to shut down businesses and go to work for somebody else while we fight policy? Or are we still supposed to start building and strengthening our economic base while we also fight for the right policy? Because policy is what allows Wall Street to be burnt down and not rebuilt and no one prosecuted. Policy is what let white slavery owners white slave owners rather get reparations instead of the slaves, because you didn't know that reparations was paid in this country. It was paid to slave owners, roughly $300 per slave. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I just want us to recognize, like, policy did that, and policy, and because I'm gonna get into something else. Let me get into something else. Policy plays a very important role in what he's talking about, and I hear him, right? So, okay, so the 6-figure hour, maybe it can't be verified. I don't know. I'm not saying that. I'm saying he cited an article that stated the 6-hour figure could not be verified, but I don't think that it's far-fetched when you start breaking down your spending habits. So you as an individual can go look at what you spend, right? Especially if you do it through the banking system, you could go down into your bank. You can look at everywhere that you've spent. You can equate for how much money has gone back into Black hands. Hardly any of it. I'm a person who purposely tries to buy Black, and it is a struggle. It's a struggle. If I want to shop conveniently, it's impossible to shop conveniently and buy Black. So I have to go out of my way to find Black products, or I have to order online, because if I want to get true laundry detergent, it's not in the fucking store. I have to order it. So what happens when I'm almost out of laundry detergent? I'm busy, because believe me, my life is busy as hell, and I forgot to reorder my true laundry detergent. Now I'm back in the store buying Gain because I don't have access to it. Right? So it's not a far-fetched idea to believe that our dollar rarely circulates inside of our communities. You can go down and you can verify that for yourself. Go ask 10 of your friends. We could all do an experiment. So the idea that he would kind of make it seem like this is, maybe true, maybe not true, it's pretty true. It might circulate less than $10. 6 hours. So I just thought that was crazy. And that was one of the places that he started to lose me. So then he starts talking about how businesses get beat up. So again, I'm going to reference what he says, because here's an area that I actually 110% agree with him, right? So he says, in America, at every stage of the business life cycle, the economy beats Black businesses like a piñata. As a Black business owner, this is so true. Battered by higher insurance prices, hammered by stingy investors, pummeled by exclusive supply chains. Y'all want to know why we can't take back over the hair care industry? It's because of exclusive supply chains. Just know that. I've looked into it. When a sister out here was body slammed by a cop for not stealing, we were boycotting that store. And then I stopped the boycotting efforts, because as soon as I digging into why this was this way, I realized that there were exclusive supply chain issues. So what actually happened in that situation was there are 2 Black-owned beauty supply chains here in Denver. There used to be more, but there's 2. One is African-owned, one is African-American owned. And I call everybody Black, but I want to make that distinction. One is African-owned, one is African-American owned. And what ended up happening is the Asian company put in a call, and next thing you know, the two beauty supply chains that we were promoting and say, don't shop here, but go and shop there, they were about to lose their order. Like, all of a sudden, their distribution channel was getting ready to be cut off. So the Black one, they wanted to talk to us. The African one was like, nah, right? So on the back end, they told us, they were like, listen, like, we had to dissociate from your boycott in order for us to receive our supplies. So, we can't participate. We don't want you coming here filming us. We don't want the extra notoriety or none of that, because we're going to get shut down. Now, what they did do, this was a great collaboration. What they did do was they actually ordered extra supplies and helped the Black-owned company get them some supplies until they were able to get everything smoothed out. But that's a process that we have to understand, is that there are exclusive supply chains, and we don't partake in those. So he goes on to say, assaulted by recessions, thrashed by exclusionary regulators, pounded by an intergenerational wealth gap. Couldn't read that. All right. So then basically saying that, like, we can't compete with monopolies like Amazon and Walmart, right? So I'm in 100% agreement with him here. actually, I'm in 100% agreement with him here, that these are some of the issues. This is why it's important, and why I think it's important for us to recognize this is because we like to act like black folks, like we don't trust each other, right? So we like to act like Black folks just be charging higher prices, struggle to keep their inventory together, all of these things just because we are shitty. Like, this is how Black consumers approach Black business owners. When you hear people say, I don't shop with Black businesses, I don't buy Black, and then they want to list the parade of, of stuff that we have to go through. So we struggle to get support from our own community without our own community having an understanding of what is actually happening. We are charged higher prices. We are not, we do not have access to the distribution channels from people who look like us. Our supply chains are managed by other people. We do not have access to capital. And and all of these are policy issues, right? White people have access to capital because they have 401ks, they have savings, they have friends and family, they have a house. A house is a big key factor. Our home ownership is not the same rate as their home ownership. And because of that, when they get ready to go and pull cash out of their house, so remember, I'm going to pull cash out of my house. I have an asset I own free and clear, and they do not want to let me pull cash out of my own asset. That's a whole nother story for another day. But just understand, they go and get lines of credit out of their own, second mortgages, lines of credit, home equity lines of credit, things like that off of their own properties. They are able to take that capital and they're able to start their businesses. They can buy supplies. They can get equipment. They can get brick and mortars. They can buy the proper insurance. They can help get some of their infrastructure set up, right? And because oftentimes they work together, they can do other things to help them undergird their business that Black businesses don't have access to. We don't have home ownership. We were redlined out of home ownership. We were redlined out of property values. When people talk about, look at what's happening with gentrification, and if we had just held on and took better care of our communities, our property values would be like that. That's absolute bullshit. Don't let them tell you that. It's just not true. Our home values are devalued because the banking system, through the tax system and the banking system, is what comes and gives these valuations. Again, white and government owned. So it wouldn't have mattered, here in Denver, it wouldn't have mattered if Black folks maintained 5 points. 5 points just wouldn't have been worth what 5 points is worth today. That's what the difference would have been. The difference isn't that 5 points, like your grandma's house was not going to be worth $700,000. That wasn't going to happen. It's only worth $700,000 because they depreciated the value down to $100,000 had it bought out, because she ain't never had $100,000 in her life. Now she got $100,000. She's out of a house. Now the house is worth $500,000, $700,000. It was never going to be that way with your grandmother living in it. It wouldn't have mattered if your grandmother had the most manicured lawn ever. It wouldn't matter if she paid all her bills. Because your grandmother was Black, that's why it wasn't going to be worth that, right? And that happens in other communities. I'm mentioning Denver because that's where I'm living at, and that's where that situation is happening. But I'm also from Oakland, California. Same thing is happening out there, right? And we know in our hoods everywhere, these things are happening. They were never going to be worth what they're worth with white faces living in them. That is a policy issue. That's a policy issue. So everything he's saying here is absolutely true. Black businesses are put through the ringer all the time. So that's why I laughed at even the idea that being a Black entrepreneur like somehow shielded you or protected you from all the bullshit. It definitely doesn't. It exposes you to a whole new level of bullshit and fuckery that you didn't even know existed. So then he goes on to talk about opportunity zones. So now here's the thing, right? Because you got people, and this is the thing that kind of starts to worry me is this idea that you have people who are by and large successful through the entertainment industry. Also another industry that is largely white owned. I'll leave that right there. But you have people who are in the entertainment industry who come out and who are using their status as though this is like something we can all do. Jay-Z wants to go and buy the block. Good for Jay-Z. Jay-Z is not worth the same amount as the average Black person. So Jay-Z can go and buy a block by his damn self. Okay. We have to get a whole lot of us together in order for us to buy the block. I want us to understand what we're talking about. Not that you can't go and buy land. Okay. I'm going to use Detroit as an example. I own 4 lots of land in Detroit and a house. What am I going to do with those lots? To build on those lots, it's still going to cost the same amount in construction as anywhere else, right? So in order for me to build on the lots, I still need money. Unless I got a couple $100,000 rolling around for one property, then I have to have rents that sustain that, right? Because if I'm going to put out cash, and this is the way that we kind of have to think about things, right? Why do people go and get loans? Loans is a way for you to use your cash. So let me give you an example. If I go and I put, let's say I'm going to use $100,000 for easy math. Let's say I have $100,000. I can use $30,000 to go and put down on 3 different $100,000 properties, and I can finance the other, $90,000, $70,000. I can go and finance the other $70,000, right? So I could take $100,000 and buy $300,000 worth of property versus taking $100,000 and buying $100,000 worth of property. Does that make sense? Hopefully, let me say that again. If I have $100,000 in cash, instead of me buying $100,000 house in cash and owing nobody, I can actually take that and I could put 30% down on 3 $100,000 houses. I would have financed $210,000. I would have paid up front $90,000, but I would have assets worth $300,000. So instead of having one $100,000 asset, I'd have $300,000 worth of assets. I hope that makes sense. That's the leverage of being able to use debt, right? When you go in and you're looking at how you're going to develop that land, where are you going to get that money from? Inside the Black community, where are we going to get that money from? To develop a block is a couple $1 million worth. Like, don't let anybody fool you and act like we finna put up $200,000. Like, ooh, $200,000 is a drop in the bucket. It's really not anything. And so I think sometimes we have to have perspective on how much money is really out there. I just had a thought, y'all, and I had to refrain because that would have took me on a whole nother topic. On Thursday, I'm going to talk about the bullshit that we do, how we undercut each other for these fucking crumbs. That's what I'm going to talk about. So anyway, let me move that thought to the side. Save that for another day. So we have to understand when we talk about buy the block, how much of a collaborative effort it really has to be to own a very small piece of the pie, right? Especially because the lending practices are not in our favor. So even if we gathered up, let's say we gathered $1 million, in theory, $1 million should be able to leverage $3 million. But we have to get a bank to lend us $3 million in order for that 1 million to leverage, right? So that's a 30% down kind of thing. That's getting into some details, but just understand, like, if we had $1 million, we should be able to leverage $1 million for $3 million. Maybe we could push it to $4 million. We should be able to leverage somewhere in between there. But the banks have to give us that. We're not, and our banks are not in the position to do that oftentimes. And that's where we start facing policy and systemic oppression issues, right? So he goes on and talking about these opportunity zones. So here's the thing about these opportunity zones, y'all, like, oh my goodness, I'm so conflicted. So as a person who is involved in real estate and development and business development and ownership and like that's my life. I love it. I get excited. I geek out on it, like all of that, right? I mean, that's my life. Okay. So I get opportunity zones. Like I get it and I love it, right? But ultimately, let's talk about what this really is for the Black community. And let's talk about how this was marketed. So this is where he talks about Black capitalism, because Black capitalism was like a program. So we also have to understand that there's a history that's here. So I get what he's saying. Okay. So opportunity zones are getting ready to undergird the next wave of like white baby boomers. What do I mean by that? Okay. So you have baby boomers, then you have Gen X, then you have millennials, right? I think I have everybody. Is there Gen X, Gen Y? Whatever. Baby boomers, right now are supporting in a lot of ways millennials, right? So, okay, so let me see how I want to break this down. So there were policy pieces that were put in place during the baby boomer era that allow for a lot of wealth to be built and be created, right? So still were there issues? Yes. But if you want to look at the Black middle class, you're going to predominantly be looking at baby boomers, right? They have, they own their homes. A lot of them have businesses. They have, like, they were the last like generation to retire with like the gold watch and a pension. So if they work somewhere for a long time, I've mentioned that before. My father is in that era. My father is 73. He did retire, like he retired with a pension, right? So you have that piece, okay? So a lot of wealth was retained in that era, and what they're finding, Black and white, is that millennials are struggling, right? So we have all this crushing student loan debt. There's all these other pieces, like wages are stagnant. They've been stagnant for a long time. So what you have are suppressed wages. You have a cost of living that's increasing. You have a lot of debt that you're burdened with. That is the reality of a lot of millennials, and certainly for a lot of Black folks. When white folks are struggling with something, Black folks is dying from it, right? So so understand that. But how the baby boomers like got that boom, right? How they were able to build a lot of that wealth was through a lot of policy. And so it's not lost on the government. If you look at somebody like a Trump, and then you look at his kids, obviously his kids are in a different, ballpark, but what they're talking about, other people in his generation, let me not use him, but other people in his generation are recognizing that like their kids are in trouble, right? Their kids are in some deep shit, and they keep trying to bail their kids out. They're paying student loans. They're paying loans for people. They're helping them get their businesses started. But ultimately they're in a lot of shit. So, I don't know why this just popped out, but Douglas said he have a question. So go on and ask your question real quick, but I'm gonna get back to this. Who should we support that will support our views for the 2020 election? Okay, that's off the topic of this, but I don't have an answer to that. I mean, people are still out here rolling out. We got a little bit of a ways before we have to figure that piece out. As of right now, ain't nobody looking too good. But if I had a pick today, out of the candidates that I see today, I will probably say right now, Elizabeth Warren is probably at the top of my list today. Do I think any of the candidates are for the Black community? Nope. But if I had to pick someone like right now today, I had to go to the poll, probably Elizabeth Warren. That's my pick. But that's not my real pick. I'm saying out of the candidates and what they've presented today. Don't y'all soundbite me on that shit. All right. So wait, I want to talk about these opportunity zones, because I want us to understand how this is getting ready to undergird a whole new wave of white wealth, right? That's officially what this is. So we have to understand that policy is what has helped create white wealth. White people are mediocre as fuck. They did not create their own wealth. Policy has created their wealth. So again, when we talk about this wealth gap, let's recognize two things. Policy has helped boost up the white community, and it's also purposely suppressed the Black community. And that's why the gap is so large, because we have been pushed down and they have been elevated. They did not pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That's not what happened. They created a political system that allowed them to create policy and push money and circulate money through their community that helped to elevate their business stature, okay? And then they also had policy that helped to suppress ours. So let's just make sure that we understand why the gap is as big as it is, and why movements like ADOS is saying that we have to have policy to help regulate that, because policy is what created that gap, right? That gap was created through their head start, but it was then compounded significantly through policy. So no question about it. So an opportunity zone is basically what they're saying is these these areas that are economically suppressed, these areas that are underserved, these areas that are underutilized, right? Basically, what they're saying is all these poor, fucked up areas where Black people stay, and for all intents and purposes, where Black and brown people stay, where some of the poor Asians stay. Because when we say Asian, we think it's like the gambit, but there's a couple of Asian communities that are thriving. There are some really poor Asian communities. So basically, where all these like poor people are, all these poor communities are, our communities are, we're going to come in and we're going to give you a tax incentive to develop them. So they're touting these opportunity zones like the opportunity is for those communities, but really what the opportunity is for rich developers to come in and grab, it's a land grab land, grab assets. We're going to give you a ton of tax breaks for you to infuse your millions and billions and trillions of dollars into these areas, develop them into places where the people who have historically lived there can no longer afford to live there, but they're going to be beautiful. And they're touting them as things like, but you can get jobs, right? So the top-down situation has never happened because the top-down is not regulated. The more profits that rich people make, there's no regulation that they have to actually pass that shit on down. So they talk about a top-down model, which is basically what an opportunity zone is saying, if you're rich as fuck, come in here, put your money into this area. We'll give you all these breaks, all these incentives in order for you to put your money here. And we're going to make it seem like what you're going to do when you get here is you're going to make better housing, meaning more expensive housing. You're going to make, you're going to create jobs, right? But you get the choice of hiring who you want to. And as we've seen in Detroit, they're not hiring locals for these new jobs, right? They're pulling people from the suburbs, bringing them into the city. They're not hiring the people who already live in the city. So, and because they're private developers and private business owners who are doing this, the government does not regulate what that looks like for them. So we have to recognize that situation as well, right? And so what happens is that this is creating a whole new wave of wealth for white people, not Black people. And if you have a Black person here and there who's able to who is able to, take advantage of that, have a Jay-Z or a Nipsey with his business partners or whatever, or a T.I. or a Charlemagne. Like if you have one of them who can take advantage, right? Robert Smith is taking advantage of some of those things, then great. But as a system and as a whole for the entire Black community, it does nothing. It actually really just displaces us out of places that we've historically been, that already have been underutilized, underserved, not properly protected, not had any capital infusion into those places that benefit the people. So as much as it excites me as a person who wants to build businesses, there are things that I want to build an opportunity zone too. And so they make it seem like we have the opportunity to come in and take advantage of these opportunity zones. But how, Sway? With what money? Because Black folks don't have that by and large. So how many of us is it going to take to put together our little chump change to come up with the millions of dollars that it takes to invest inside these opportunity zones? They're not investing a couple of thousands of dollars in opportunity zones. These organizations are not investing a couple $100,000s of dollars in opportunity zones. The land in opportunity zones, just because it was deemed an opportunity zone, has already started to go up. So you're not you have to have millions of dollars to invest in the opportunity zone. And maybe if you have the right type of mentality or heart, you give back, right? So it's interesting because now you have T.I. and Charlemagne the God and David Gross and a few other people, first of all, who went and met with the Black Congressional Caucus. Stop it. But anyway, so now they're talking about creating this fund. So they launched their website, and their website has nothing on it. So first of all, I'm not about to shoot these brothers down. I'm not. What I will say is that they rolled out an idea with no guts to it that we can see. I went on the website. There's nothing there. It tells you that they want to create a fund and that fund will help to support entrepreneurs who want to build inside of the opportunity zone. And basically, they're calling on their counterparts, they're calling on those who have wealth to put into the fund so that fund can be used to support businesses who want to take advantage of the opportunity zone. Sounds like a very noble idea. It's still not systemic change. It's still going to be a fraction of what the opportunity zones will do for white wealth. And they haven't rolled out the plan as to how they're actually doing that. So on the website, it lists out like a summary, and it says contact us. And it's a basic contact form. So it doesn't even say like, do you want to contact us because you want to donate into the fund? Do you want to contact us because you want to get access to the fund so that you can build? Do you want to learn more about how opportunity zones work? I mean, where are they? Like, so here's what's missing. Capacity building is missing. True structural organization is missing. Like, oversight is missing. I mean, none of those pieces are there. Okay. Not that I can see. And so they launched it, and I don't know if they launched it so quickly because they had this meeting, because Forbes, did a piece on them, because it was publicized, because this was something that Nipsey was doing. I don't know why they rolled it out half-baked like this. But again, we're going back and we're relying on people who have influence, right? If you are a rapper who basically, or let's say an entertainer, right? You're a LeBron James, you're a Stephen Curry, you're a T.I., you're any of these people who have centers of influence. So you have large followings. It's not difficult to build a sustainable business. It's not difficult to roll out your clothing line and think that people won't buy it from you. They will. They bought your album. They're going to buy your clothes, right? It's not like building a business in an industry is what matters. Like, take over Black media. If you play sports, like, take over a fucking team or build a league, right? Looking at some of the industries that we actually need to be inside of, like, take over tech, right? And so, not like the individual investor, not like Nas going in and individually making smart investment moves. That's an individual situation that doesn't undergird like the whole, the system, right? So we're talking about like what is supporting the system for Black entrepreneurs, and that doesn't do it. So I'm not bashing these guys. I'm actually waiting in anticipation for them to roll out something of substance. I feel very unfortunate that what they wrote out was just so half-baked that if you're a person like me, you're going to go in and you're going to be like, what the hell is this, right? Peace. Thank you so much. Assuming the influential can only do so much as agricultural zones are being hit hard this year, could talking about what that means for a future be a starting point? So I think it could be a starting point. And I guess to this guy's point in this article, he comes back down, like I said, at the very end, he's saying, at the end, he's saying we need to change the narrative, right? So it could be a starting point for conversation. But I think it is, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's a weak starting point. Because, to promote the idea around opportunity zones, what is actually being promoted is the destruction of our communities, right? That is what's happening. And as much as I get it from a business standpoint, like I said, opportunity zones excite me from a business standpoint. And there are places that I want to take advantage of opportunity zones because I have a community mindset, right? But the average developer is not community minded like that. And so they're going to do the same thing that they've been doing in all these other places where they've been gentrifying. They've been gentrifying without the tax breaks, or they've been getting like individual tax breaks, like certain cities that are developing. So like Denver is giving tax breaks to a lot of these developers. So that's why they're able to come in and gentrify this way. So now the opportunity zone is like a federal level tax break, right? So, I mean, it is taking gentrification to a whole nother level, where you have state supported gentrification and now you have federal level supported gentrification. So I think that it is that by and large, it's actually more harmful to our communities than it is good, because we are not able to take advantage of that. And we are most likely not going to be the benefactor of those opportunity zones unless you have community minded people. So again, like their idea of pulling in, getting people of influence, as you said, to pull in and begin to create a fund, I think is a great idea. I wish I have nothing else to go off of, because the site is so, like I said, half baked. The site has nothing on there but that and a contact form, a basic contact form, right? So I hope that they are coming. Like I said, I'm waiting in anticipation. I'm not trying to tear these brothers down. I'm waiting in anticipation. But I feel like, the way that they are rolling it out is not beneficial. So it gets people excited, but not necessarily excited about the right message. So we have to understand the Trump administration really is not for the Black community. When that's what they did. They met with the Trump administration. That's really what it was. They met with the Trump administration to talk about opportunity zones. So they met with an administration that is not for our community to talk about a federal initiative, a federal development initiative nationwide that is going to cause our community more harm than good. And they're trying to shore it up by saying, let's also get a piece of this pie. Our slice is going to be so tiny, it ain't going to feed our community. So that's what I'm trying to get across. Like, even then, opportunity zones is under a time limit, right? Like, we're starting this endeavor so late that how quickly are they going to get the money together with people who have viable plans to make solid investments before the opportunity zones close? They're time sensitive. So, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like this piece it came from a lot of different directions. I feel like it basically, tore down the idea of Black entrepreneurship. I feel like it tore at the morale of Black people to try and create, or not even to try, to work on creating sustainable economic ventures for ourselves, as well as to unite us under legislative initiatives or policies that would actually help us. I'm like struggling to get my words out there, but that's what I feel like this did. Was this article really just tore at the morale of what it means to build or participate in Black economics without providing any actual tangible solutions, right? And talk about how we need to unify as a community in order to push the policy legislation, the legislation that needs to be in place. It doesn't talk about any of the legislation that needs to be created, and it doesn't talk about how we can work together to build a stronger economic base. That is a lot of the work that I do in the Black Business Initiative. Because we start so many of these businesses by ourselves, I really am pushing for people to link up in partnership and link up in cooperatives and do things where we can pull our money together and create investment groups within ourselves and create giving circles within our own communities, right? So we do have money. We have to just shift where it goes. This is the last thing that I'm going to talk about, because I'm well over an hour and I don't even usually talk this long, but this is the last piece I'm gonna talk about, because it is important for us to shift what it is that we're doing. And I apologize because my lighting and all of that is horrible in here, y'all, but I'm in the process of fixing up. I had mentioned when I started, I was in the process of fixing up my office. So I'm in my room and I'm just working with what I got. So please bear with me. But hopefully for Thursday, I'll be in my office. But anyway, so I think it's important that we recognize that we have to shift where we are putting our money. Let's talk about this 1.5 let's say $1.3 trillion, right? Like the money that we have. And I think we have to understand how spending power is attributed to us. So first of all, we give millions and 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 millions of fucking dollars to the church. That is spending power. That church puts your dollars inside a white bank. That white bank does not lend the dollars back to you. Those buildings that you're helping to build inside the church are oftentimes not available to the community at large. Those dollars employ very few people. Most people who work for the church volunteer for the church. Very few people are on paid church staff, right? So, but that is spending power. That is dollars that leave our house that go inside the church. Student loans, spending power. We have millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and you get my point? We have a lot of money that goes into the education system. Now, you didn't get any of that money, but it went through you into the school, and that's called spending power. You also now have debt attached to that. So you have to pay that back. And we're one of the highest defaulters on student loan debt. So we like to talk and tout about how we are obtaining the most student loan degrees, which is true. But we're not talking about how we are also defaulting on those student loans, because as much as we like to talk about the valedictorian and the person and how great our kid did in school, the majority of us are not getting full rides. Even in sports, they're not getting full rides. They might be getting partial scholarships. They might have a scholarship for a year or two. They're not getting 100% full rides being paid for. They are taking out student loans. They are taking out student loans. Their parents are taking out student loans. That is spending power, because you have spent money on your behalf through the form of a loan. Mortgages, we're not getting them in abundance, but when we talk about spending power, when you buy a house, that's counted towards our spending power. So are car loans. So when we look at this $1.2 trillion, we act like we got 100. We look like we got 1.2, 1.3, however much you want to say it is, whichever study it is that you read, of liquid cash floating around, right? And we don't. And you know you don't, because you struggle month to month. So there are places that we could redirect. I don't have a cable bill. I don't watch cable. My Netflix is $15 a month. That was a far cry from the, what was it, $90-something a month I paid for cable, right? We can shift getting our hair done and our nails done. We can shift the type of clothes we buy. You know, there's a lot of, we can shift the money that we give to the church. There's a lot of areas that we can shift. What happens if we shift it inside of our own communities and we begin to strengthen ourselves by investing inside of giving circles or investment clubs, or businesses, or joining together to work with businesses, being able to pitch to a group, get money. We can do these things. We're not doing these things, but we can do these things. We should be doing these things. Someone said minimalist lifestyle. I'm with you, because that is what I went through. That in and of itself is a whole nother topic. And I could talk about how I went on my journey to minimalism, because I spent a lot of time actually wrestling with what I actually valued versus what our society and media tells us we should value. And that actually did start me on my journey toward minimalism. I've probably been, I actually still am working towards minimalism. And I say that because I have a few things in my garage that I'm still cleaning out. But when I pared down shit, I gave away 2 bags of shoes, 7 bags of clothes, donated all of it. Gave away a lot of purses. I wear a lot of my own brand, or I wear Black owned brand, t-shirts or whatever. I have a few other things here and there, but I'm comfortable like that. But I have to actually go back and think about the things that I value, and not what other people said I should value, what I value. So I hear you. Minimalism has changed my whole life. But anyway, so, like I said, to kind of close out, like, we have to begin to shift where we place our dollars. And I think the narrative of Black economic empowerment is still very important, but we also need to understand its limitations. It has to be supported by policy. So we have to get unified. We do need to continue to create businesses, but it's how we create those businesses, and it's how we work together to shore up those businesses to ensure that they are stronger and better positioned businesses. We have to get into other industries that matter. We also have to look at how we begin to break into things like our supply chain and our distribution channels and make sure that we control and operate some of those things, right? And so I'm not going to say we have to jump into manufacturing. I think it would be good, but we also have to look at how the times are, if those things are viable or possible, right? But even if we're not in manufacturing, we have to be in distribution. We have to be inside of that supply chain other than just on the tail end of the retail end of it, right? And the consumerism end of it. So, we have to begin to make that shift. And I'm going to keep preaching that message, because when we're looking for the answers and solutions, there isn't any magical fucking formula. That's what it is. Like, we have to work together. Unity is an answer. It's an answer that feels very nuanced at times, but it's really not that nuanced. Our power is in our collective ability to leverage. So when we talk about going to those oppressors, we have to go in power. If we don't go in power, this is why those things have never gained traction. The Congressional Black Caucus has sent up a Black agenda. You and me just don't know about it because, like, who are they? Where are they relevant in the Black community? And because there's no unity behind them, everything they send over to the White House falls on deaf ears. So we have to recognize that our power is really in our unity, and that our policy will change when we are unified behind a political agenda. But we cannot negate the fact that ownership and entrepreneurship and capitalism is the way that this is going to go on this soil. So unless we're going to change the entire political system of America, then we have to be playing with the right pieces on the right board. So, I felt like that article that he wrote was more harmful than it was good, even though he had a lot of good points, and even though he had a significant amount of research that I think was like well placed. The overall message, like, he brought literally no solutions. It was a complete rant against Black economic empowerment, and I find that to be very problematic. I think Black economic empowerment needs to come together and push a political agenda that supports that, because that, again, is the crux of capitalism. So we have to have the policy and the economics in order for us to sustain ourselves as a socioeconomic group on American soil. So with that, I thank y'all for joining me. I know this is a lot longer than I normally go, but I appreciate y'all for hanging in there with me. There were a lot of comments. I'm going to try and go back through and see what I can answer. And definitely, if you want like a question answered or whatever, don't hesitate to drop it into the actual comments after this goes off, and then it's easier for me to respond back than trying to go back through all the live comments. But I will try to do that and see if I can answer any questions. But I appreciate y'all for joining with me. Please subscribe. Make sure that you share this information out, y'all. I'm Jice Johnson with the Black Business Initiative, and check us out at BBI Professional. You can definitely connect with me at Patreon at Grind with Jice. Remember to text BlackAgenda to 484848 so you can stay up to date with what's going on with the Black Agenda on tour. Denver, if you are on the chat, just remember that we have added Denver to the tour, so you can go ahead and get your tickets now. That'll be June 29th. I think I have hit everything. Oh, I have coaching slots open, y'all. I have a couple of coaching slots left. So if you want to coach with me, if you are a Black business owner and you were looking to get your business started, growing, or scaled, you want to look at accessing capital, things like that, you can come and talk with me. I also coach on mindset and productivity, how to be how to be productive and not just busy. So those are some of the things that I touch on. So make sure y'all connect with me, and I will talk to y'all on Thursday. All right. Peace.